right. We had three great presentations, and we are now going to move into the questions and answer period. Using my prerogative again, as Denise Diamond already did, as moderator, I will start things off. Here, economists oftentimes are sort of preoccupied with the notions of supply and demand and where they meet. So you'll excuse me if I fall back on this line of questioning, but we heard Bill talk about, briefly mention, changing attitudes. We also heard Patricia Marcus in her opening remarks talk about the importance of changing attitudes in the innovation process. So my question is, do innovations respond to or do they create the demand that they fill? And how do you, or is it both in certain different situations? And how do your respective business models take those dynamics into account? Why don't we start with, go in the order in which the presenters originally.
Is this working? Yes? Okay. From my point of view, well, I think I pretty much said it in the beginning of my presentation. Human needs have different ways to be solved. So from my point of view, innovation only answers to human behavior, not the other way around. I don't truly believe there's a significant change in human behavior because of the existence of products. I just think it's a new manifestation of an old human behavior. So.
I would say usually when you're doing some kind of product innovation, you're starting with an insight into a need. And that need actually might not be very well expressed if it's a consumer need. So in our case, typically, you're looking for things that improve athletic performance. But when it comes to the work around sustainability, I think that the needs there are clearly, we need to create a better world that uses fewer resources if we're going to have 9 billion people on the planet. And we are consuming our resources and polluting at a rate that is completely unsustainable. So the need is very clear, and the innovation is lagging. So in that case, I think it's very much the innovation is responding to that need. But occasionally you'll get things that just come out of the blue, and so the reverse may be true.
And is this working? Since this was opened up as an economist's question, I'll give you the economist's answer, which is it depends. But I can think of two fairly distinct examples. There's a great deal of research going on right now in the area of vaccines for treatment of big problems. HIV vaccine development, a lot of money being invested in that. When they hit on something that is shown to work, they're not going to have any trouble with the demand side of things, right? It's a known gaping hole in demand that's very well understood. What's not understood is the solution. On the other side, a project that I've been working on for some time having to do with safe water treatment, much more complicated problem, because water in the developing world is increasingly not safe for a number of different reasons: industrial waste, human waste, stress on water sources, right, as the water tables go down. The problem is you can't see it or smell it or taste it in terms of what's genuinely dangerous. So the aesthetic aspect of water is the way that people interact with water. If it's cloudy or in some way smells funny, then people are going to be less likely to want to drink it. But there's really no way for them to know whether or not it's actually safe. So there's a lot of work that we have to do, even after we come up with technology that treats for the dangerous stuff in the water, to educate people on the fact that they need to treat their water. And this is probably going to be an increasing issue. It's something that you can probably expect to see over the next 10 years or so, that we start to think about water the same way that we think about petroleum right now. It's that kind of a problem. And it's worse because there's no alternative. So it really depends on the nature of the solution and how well the underlying problem is understood, I think.
Excellent. Well, let's open this up to the audience. And again, please stand up and introduce yourself before your question.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Swanson. And my question is, looking at this particular conference, where it's not just the triple bottom line, it's the 4P bottom line. And to me, peace is helping to focus resources to get people to work together to accomplish a better world. In what ways does each of your organizations look towards the future and incorporating your value systems into achieving that fourth P?
I'll start. I think some of this, I would say, is sort of the other prong of the work that we do around access to sport, because we can use sport as a tool for development, and in many cases it's used in areas where there's been conflict, so post-trauma sport can be brought in, particularly with kids, to help them overcome psychological trauma, a whole host of other things. I think in general, the role of sport is to bring people together around collaboration, teamwork, that type of thing. So I'd say there's an element of that there. I think the other thing that's happening is increasingly, you know, I come from an extremely competitive industry, particularly the sporting goods industry, where it's like, you know, kill your opponent. And I think now there's a shift. There's definitely a shift into collaboration that we're seeing a lot more. And what's been really happening in the last 4 or 5 years is that people are realizing, you know, if I know how to do my carbon footprint work, that doesn't give me a competitive advantage. You know, I should be sharing that approach with my competitors, because we all need to do a lot better here. And the faster we share and collaborate, the more we're going to solve these really, really large problems. So I think there's a lot of element around peace building in that process.
I'm going to answer that based on 2 organizations that I'm affiliated with. One is PATH, of course. The other is the University of Washington School of Law, where I teach a course called Law, Technology, and Development. And there, because of the institution, because of the nature of the subject matter, we look pretty hard at the social justice and the fairness of distribution, and the potential for one solution leading to peace and the other leading to conflict. If you think in terms of resources, you don't have to look very far to find global conflict originating from a dispute over resources. And there's a fairly famous quote, I wish I could remember who said it, but his quote was, "The next great war is not going to be over petroleum, it's going to be over water." So to the extent that you can address resource management in a little bit more intelligent way, maybe in a little bit more equitable way, you, I think, have a fairly direct link between the technology and the improvement of resource management and conflict. In fact, I would imagine that to the extent that Stephen's work leads to improvement of the slums, a decrease in tires washing their way into San Diego, you know, you will find that there's less conflict over that proximity.
And I think more than a corporate vision, you find that more and more people that works in every step of the pyramid in big corporations are more and more interested in participating and collaborating with new ideas on how to approach the 4 Ps. And I remember working in packaging, and I was amazed because when I got in, I had this bunch of ideas about sustainability, and I was amazed to find out that most of them were already being looked at, and new technologies were constantly being developed. And more and more I felt that the 4 Ps came together to become like a holistic solution, because the fragmented intentions were not as powerful. So you will see more and more that even though people are researching new materials or new technologies, they're thinking about the possible byproducts of community behavior. And of course, they're always thinking about profit, and more solutions like they were sharing before with Mandala, is that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to become more expensive, but we're seeing that it can be less expensive and even more profitable to our final consumer, and even better to what we're trying to accomplish in the long run. So I think there's a lot of things being done.
Yes. Brian Nichols, International MBA. My question is for Sarah and Diego. You might have just answered it, but in developing more sustainable products, that are lasting longer, therefore consumers are consuming less. If I'm not buying shoes as much, that's impacting your revenues as a company. So what is Nike doing to offset that lost revenue from less shoes being sold?
Well, I think there's two ways to think about this. One is obviously that markets are continuously growing, so you have more people accessing product that didn't before. I think the other thing is that we've recognized that consumers, you might want to create a product that could last for 5 years, but unfortunately, still the predilection of consumers is to get bored with that product after, usually our product is probably discarded before it's really finished with, even now. And so I think our view on that is to say, okay, we recognize that that's something that we need to satisfy. That's a consumer need, if you like. And rather than try and re-educate everybody to wear their shoes for 5 years instead of 1, we have to take the product back. And if we can do that based on renewable energy, renewable materials, and we have this closed-loop system, then that's the way to address the problem. And I can tell you, we've had fairly heated discussions about this internally. It was constant debate, but there's a very clear view that that's not what the consumer's asking for.
Okay. Down here and then in the back.
Hi, Michael Brower again. Sarah, you guys make beautiful product, and I believe strongly in what Phil Knight has always said, and that your product is your greatest marketing tool. So you've been very successful there. Take me into the behind the corporate doors. When you're trying to balance sustainability, being good to the earth and the planet and the people, and being a good social responsible citizen, and balancing that out against feeding the street, which is a major obstacle. Tell me how you wage that battle between doing what this room thinks is right versus that extra point of margin on the next Jordan shoe or the next soccer star that's coming out. Tell me how you manage that. And can you also tell me at the board level, where you have an audit and a comp committee and various other committees, do you have a social responsibility committee that helps balance to make sure that your concerns and the tasks that you're set to address are measured accordingly against the other corporate objectives?
Yes, so I'll start with the second part. Yes, we do have a corporate responsibility committee or sustainable business and innovation committee that's been in existence since 2001, I believe. And so they are, and very often presentations that are made to that committee are also made to the full board. So there's very active board involvement in the work that we do. The shift for us from moving from a sort of, this is the right thing to do as a corporation, and whether Wall Street wants it or not, this is the path we're on, to saying, actually, this isn't just about corporate responsibility, this is a source of innovation and growth for the company, is how we're having that dialogue now internally and with investors, and saying, this isn't about this shoe being more expensive, because it wasn't. Because in many cases what you're doing, this shoe actually is called the Trash Talk shoe. And it was a shoe worn by Steve Nash, who's a point guard for the Phoenix Suns. And it's made from scrap that came off the factory floor that would have been just thrown away, or at best perhaps downcycled, because there's a lot of the places where we produce shoes, there's a very active recycling culture anyway. But it was designed to incorporate that waste. And so there's savings, there's cost savings in that. So what you're able to say is that, sometimes there's trade-offs. You might have a more innovative material that's a little bit more expensive, but you've designed a huge amount of waste out of your system because you've nested products differently when you're actually going through the cutting process. So there's a whole range of ways in which you can bring the financial equation into this. And bottom line is consumers are demanding this now. And Jules talked about this a lot, that there is, particularly amongst the generation that is our core target consumer, the millennial generation, they just expect companies to do this. And if you're not doing it, you're not going to be selling product.
I just wanted to add, too, is that I hope you're right that we do see the collaboration between Adidas, Nike's, Under Armour. For some reason, the collaboration word doesn't seem to fit within those organizations, but
We
hope
do a
you're
lot.
right.
You'd be surprised.
All right.
Hi, I'm Rohini from the full-time MBA program. My question is more directed towards Pat, Bill. Companies like Nike, PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, Revlon, they all have an advantage of being a bigger corporation where there's a lot of fun and a lot of support when it comes to sustainability or innovation or collaboration with other bigger corporations. But organizations like PATH, which has more understanding of lot of understanding of grassroots issues in developing countries especially, a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise. But when you go into your commercialization strategy for getting out your products as commercially viable, available, acceptable products, I'm sure there would be a lot of how do I put it, not a very supportive infrastructure to get it out, because it's not a huge name or a brand as much as the other corporations who are already in the arena. So how do you handle such issues? For example, even convincing UNICEF that you have something, or partnering with a huge public sector organization, or a private sector organization. It would have been very easy for you with Microsoft. But it would have been a cakewalk, compared to this. So how do you handle it? Because this is a sector I intend to move in. And I've seen that there is a lot of going to India, try to sell female health products. And there, again, you find some kind of a resistance coming in locally from other organizations. So how do you handle it? How do you really prove yourself as an innovator in that segment where there is a lot of competition, not just in sense of product, but in sense of cultural mindsets, in sense of acceptance? How do you really handle it?
Well, I think I would actually go back to something I learned at Microsoft, because if I think back during the time I was there, more often than not, in order for Microsoft to enter a new segment and be successful, we needed to convince partners that they needed to do things differently, because if they wanted to do things the way they were doing them, they were going to probably do them with someone else. So during that time, I developed a sense that you need a combination of things. You need the got-its, and the got-its were those who have market share, a visible name, well recognized. If they say that something's a good idea, people are going to pay attention. But then you also need the get-its, and the get-its are the ones who may not have any recognition. Nobody may have the slightest idea who they are. But when they say, I want to do what you want me to do, it's because they really understand what the potential for that change and approach is. So you can't, it's very hard to get something big done with just the get-its, right? It's very slow to get something done with just the got-its, because there's a lot of inertia. But if you can somehow manage to assemble a representation from each side, then you can get something done. You get someone who's recognized in that particular segment to say, I think this is a good idea and we're going to support it. And you get somebody who may not be recognized but really, really understands what the potential for that change is and is able to demonstrate it through some product that they bring to market. And what I found is at PATH, we basically encounter the same thing. So we spend a lot of time talking to very big players who have very big reputations, and if they decide they want to do something, it makes a big difference. But we also spend a lot of time with a lot of very, very small players that nobody's ever heard of, because they're the ones often who really show what can be done. And so you need to be aware and willing to work with both, I think.
All right, a question back here.
My name is Tara Jankowski. Thank you all for being here. I work here at the university. My question is specifically for Diego. Working for a large company like PepsiCo, you own a lot of different brands. And I'm interested in innovation in packaging, more so on the waste side. So do you have any insight about what PepsiCo is doing for their subsidiaries and just to kind of reduce the waste stream of all the different packaging?
From personal experience, when I started working in Mexico, and now I'm having more and more relationship with our business units in the States, we have these regular conventions where we talk about packaging innovation, and of course, sustainability is always the main topic of those get-togethers. And a couple of years ago, the people from UK showed us that they were migrating from plastic bags to recycled paper boxes. And for me, it was a surprise because in Mexico, we've been using recycled paper boxes for 20 years now. And suddenly, I think that there are two major streams of innovation in packaging. One of them is new materials and how they are becoming less expensive and more sustainable. And so they're becoming like a part of how we package our goods. And the other stream is learning from local businesses and the way local businesses find sustainability through local availability of raw materials and local relevance is also being applied in an amplified scale. So I can share that much insight.
Yes, any other questions?
Yeah, my name is Wyatt Todman, and my question's more for Sarah. But I was wondering, I like your concept of the closed loop, but it seems that most consumers right now take the easy way out and kind of, they'll just tend to throw things away. So I was wondering how you plan to promote the behavioral change of the closed loop, because I know right now there's so many innovative things coming out of many businesses for biodegradable products, but consumers are still continuing to throw these in they go to the landfill, and if your shoes that are supposed to be returned to Nike just get thrown in the landfill, then there's no, that's really not solving anything. So I was wondering if you have any ways to do that.
That's an excellent question. So I mentioned the Reuse a Shoe program that we have, which allows people to bring back products through our retail and through actually other collection partners. We have schools, we have people who voluntarily do this, and as long as they can arrange it on a large enough scale, it's possible to fit into the system. But ultimately, the solution is not Nike having its own take-back system, that what we really need to do is create a take-back system for footwear and apparel that is run through either some sort of joint venture for the sporting goods industry, or that we get government and municipalities involved in. And we have to have policy instruments to help us do that. So one of the things I spend a lot of time working on is figuring out, what's the policy side of the policy implications for the future that we want. If we want a closed-loop future, clearly we're going to have to shift some policies. So we have to start working in collaboration with other businesses who are interested in this, and then talking to legislators. And unfortunately, it's that piece that takes the longest. We've just spent 2 years trying to get climate legislation passed in the Senate through a business coalition that is taking a very progressive stance, and we're still not managing to do that. But perhaps this will be less political and less contentious. But that's the answer, really. It's like the bottle bill. I mean, I can't remember which of our contributors it was that talked about that. I think it was EcoATM. If people are now recycling their phones, yeah, they can recycle their shoes and apparel. It's just a behavioral change.
All right. Is there one more? One more question? All right. This will be the last.
Jules Peary. This might not be fair for you guys, PepsiCo and Nike, because I'm not sure you can do what I'm going to ask you about. It even would gross me out if you did Pepsi. But collaborative consumption. So what I mean by that is it's a trend that EcoATM is supporting, where examples of it would be Zipcar right on this campus, so repurposing cars. In Boston, there's a company called Relay Rides, which is actually doing the same thing for personal cars. So you have a car you don't use a lot, you can share it and rent it. There's one that's in high-end fashion called Rent the Runway, so you can get a fashionable designer gown and use it once. Swap.com, you can trade in your books, your CDs, your DVDs, and get what you want from someone else across the country. I can think of a lot of them. There's a whole lot going on. But again, for food, I don't really see collaborative consumption being such a great idea. But is it something you guys talk about, think about? It's just, to me, becoming very, very conscious, like something I'm noticing everywhere. But are you?
Yes, definitely. And I think, when you first think about it, you think, oh, do I really want to share my running shoes or my, sweaty recycled polyester shirt with someone? Actually, the area where I think that's really important is in creating access to sport. So in this country particularly, you know, it's become pay to play, and people have to provide their own equipment and their own clothing and footwear. And so what we're doing is getting involved in helping establish networks that will be able to better share those resources, know where they can get access to resources, even if some of them, you know, we also have inventory, excess inventory that typically would go to waste. We do a lot of work with non-profit groups who have a desperate need for a particular product. So they'll take that, and sometimes that does get reused again, you know, team shirts, for example. So I think it's more likely in the area of sports equipment too, where you can do a shared model. But it's definitely a growing area, I think.
And I mean, I think any supersized bag was designed to be socially consumed. And I can respond for the consumers that will just sit at home and eat a whole supersized bag. But what I can say is that, yes, it's a very constant topic. And I think not only the product itself, but understanding the life cycle of packaging and maybe some products could alter the way we experience the consumption of our products. For example, I will not go into specifics, but we're designing a package for Brazil that is actually half a soccer ball. The packaging itself is half a soccer ball. So the idea is that we're not wasting material, because creating a whole soccer ball will probably be more wasteful than helpful. But if two guys in recess want to play soccer and if two guys get together and, you know what, let's play soccer, they can buy a bag of chips and get their bags together, and they will have exercise for recess time. So it's a very relevant idea.
All right, thank you. These were fascinating presentations. I really enjoyed them, and great questions to you all. So please give yourselves and our terrific panelists a round of applause.